Write that down, Fumi Saito.
Hello from Burbank, California. Once again, another episode of Write That Down, Fight Game Media Network. I am Justin Nipper. I edit for FightGameMedia.com, staff writer, WrestlingObserver.com. Also work for Pro Wrestling Noah, and I'm back with Japan's leading author, historian, university sociologist, Mr. Fumi Saito. This week we are remembering former NWF Heavyweight Champion, the late Johnny Powers. He actually passed at the end of the year, late last year, late December. Powers was from the Northeast, but he ended up a much bigger name in Japan because of his connection to the late Antonio Inoki. So learn about where the Eagle Belt came from and more in this week's special episode called Remembering Johnny Powers. If you have not already, please subscribe to the Fight Game Media Network podcast feed on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, Downcast, wherever you usually listen to your podcast. It helps us out very much. Let's jump right in. Remembering Johnny Powers.
All right, Johnny Powers.
All right, Johnny Powers.
Yeah. The name Johnny Powers may not be as popular as he should be for today's audience, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And if you Google or Wikipedia Johnny Powers, you might find the rockabilly singer, same name, Johnny Powers, before this wrestler Johnny Powers. Yeah. And but Johnny Powers is very important historical figure in Japanese wrestling, pro wrestling, especially with Antonio Inoki. And what's interesting is, though, that Johnny Powers, born May 20th of 1943, okay? March 20th, 1943. Antonio Inoki born February 20th, 1943, only 1 month apart.
So already they had a sort of similar path or parallel path.
Yeah, only 1 month apart.
Mm-hmm.
And passing away same year, same age 79. But Johnny Powers basically retired from wrestling back in 1982 and basically disappeared, right? Never associated with wrestling people, or he didn't come to much of reunion or fan fest kind of thing, and then last time I believe he made appearance was like 2017, 18. Then the past 30 years of it, he never was connected with anybody in wrestling.
And I don't know how much of a star he was nationally. I think he was more of a regional star for that time too, because outside of
when wrestling was more regional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And TV was different.
But he made cover of old wrestling magazine like Wrestling Review.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. And he always had this 1970s look, like this, the curly hair, like a Brady Bunch.
And the sideburns.
Of course, yeah. So it really represent 70s, type of
70s style.
Yeah, I think so. And he was 6'4", 285-pound guy, the big guy, very big guy. And thanks to Greg Oliver's Canadian Slam Wrestling website that he would do the entire career, and he already written it. And Dave Meltzer emailed me and wanted to know his place in wrestling in Japan, and the Wrestling Observer will be doing this long feature on Johnny Powers. But we can talk about his place in Japanese wrestling.
Yeah, I don't know how many people realize how integral he was to New Japan and Antonio Inoki early on, and even before New Japan with Inoki's
he debuted.
first...
Yeah, basically Johnny Powers debuted at age of 17 and became full-time when he was 20. So it would have been 1963, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by then he debuted in Ontario area, Hamilton. They moved, headed to big city Detroit, bigger, territory, so to speak, right?
Mm.
But he was basically kind of early, bloomer, that he was challenging Bruno Sammartino's WWF World Heavyweight title like second year in business. And he had this power lock, basically figure 4 leg lock, but he called it power lock or figure 8 leg lock. Same move, but gave different name to it. And at age 22, 23, he already started promoting wrestling as an active wrestler in early 20s, but wanted to be in the promoter side of that business too. And when he was in the mid 20s, he bought Pedro Martinez Buffalo areas, like promoting rights. And he was promoter for with the show with people like Johnny Valentine, the Sheik, the Bobo Brazil, the Abdul the Butcher, the Ernie Ladd. I mean, real big name at the time. And basically ran Buffalo and the east side of the New York and Upper East Side, right? And on into Cleveland, Ohio.
Western New York, Central New York, Western New York, into Ohio, into parts of Canada, Ontario, that whole region.
Yeah, because you're from New York, so explain to me that it's not New York City, but Buffalo, New York is basically New York, but it's different culture almost.
I mean, it's the second biggest city in the state. It has its own. I mean, it's a part of Western New York, and I think the culture has more in common with states like Ohio, Michigan than New England or tri-state area.
Right.
So
not quite. Yeah, right. And
but Johnny Powers was he was a face in that area, not just in the States too, but in the part of Canada as well.
Yeah, and his first tour to Japan was October of 1966, Tokyo Pro Wrestling. The very first Antonio Inoki's 23-year-old Antonio Inoki's first outlaw company against the establishment Nippon Pro Wrestling JWA. And the very first tour Inoki had with this Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Johnny Valentine and Johnny Powers were the headliner, along with people like Sonny Myers. So it was very similar that Johnny Powers started promoting when he was the age 22, 23. 23-year-old Antonio Inoki started very first outlaw company in Japan, and Johnny Powers on the tour. And so they crossed paths. Right, and it must be really a similar, that almost a value orientation. He was always against the establishment. Yeah, and
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, I can't really think of him, or even never really associate him with the NWA. He was always one of those.
He did challenge NWA, and also he was in AWA too. Young Johnny Powers against the Crusher in cage match in Minnesota that people talk about to this day.
But he never felt like he was a part of the NWA group. He always felt like he was a part
or like a big, like a headliner or big, territory like NWA affiliate or AWA or stuff like that. But he did travel while he was a full-time wrestler. But he always wanted to have his hands on active wrestler and promoter at the same time. That kind of person. Yeah. In 1970, he established NWF. The name is very, NWF, National Wrestling Federation. It's not NWA, it's not WWF, but it's NWF. It's like it's really hard to, come up with now you have all kinds different, like a very creative name for wrestling company because there are so many. But at the time, American Wrestling Association, the National Wrestling Alliance, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, you have to sound big, right? Yeah. And the reason NWF, meant a lot in Japan was that Inoki's basically TV Asahi's Friday night primetime wrestling, World Pro Wrestling program, always talked about how there were 4 major wrestling organizations in America: NWA, AWA, WWF, and NWF. So there was like they try to put this, fourth group, Johnny Powers' group, NWF, as like a fourth major league of professional wrestling, and made it, I mean, to me as a kid, made it sound like they're all equal. Does that sound interesting?
Yeah, it feels to me when you look back on it, you look at the Japanese fan base now, I think that there's a perception that Johnny Powers and NWF were a lot bigger among
Than it
Japanese
really
fans
was.
than it really
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
And because it was Antonio Inoki's signature championship belt, was that Eagle belt that he held until IWGP thing. But NWF championship belt, I think that world title made Inoki much bigger stir in mid-70s, early to mid-70s. Yeah. It used to be what the Ohio-based local world title thing, but what was interesting was, though, that Giant Baba would beat Jack Briscoe, right, to become very first Japanese NWA World Heavyweight Champion, when NWA was the closest thing to undisputed world title, But he did that with Jack Briscoe, and he did that 3 more times with Harry Race into early 80s, that he would win the NWA World title at the beginning of the tour, a televised match, and about a week to 10 days later, he would drop the title back to Briscoe or Hardy Race on non-televised house show at the end of the tour. And it's not on TV, so casual fans or casual TV viewers kind of forget about it, right?
Of course.
And yeah, for me, like in my junior high years or something, that you wouldn't find out how Giant Baba dropped the belt back to either Briscoe or Race until following month, that when Wrestling Magazine was monthly still, and wow, Baba lost the title back, right? And it was almost let down, huh? What I'm talking about is that Johnny Powers came in as National Wrestling Federation NWA World Heavyweight Champion and had a title defense against Inoki in December of 1973. Inoki beats Johnny Powers clean. It's like a 2 out of 3 fall match. First fall, Inoki's abdominal stretch that Johnny Powers give up, right? Then second fall, Powers lock, that the figure 8 leg lock. Of course, it's figure 4, but the second fall goes to Johnny Powers. Third fall, Inoki's very special octopus manjigatame. He really wins world title. And what's important is, though, Inoki kept the title in Japan for the next 7 years. So it's not like winning American title in Japan and then it's, secretly, not a secret, but quietly drop the title back to American champion at the end of the tour or anything like that. Inoki beat Johnny Powers for NWF title, and the title became New Japan's marquee title for the next seven years. It became really important. Inoki really beat this American Major League World title, and then he kept it in Japan. Does that make sense?
And it visually became like a part of the New Japan identity around that time too.
Yeah, and that design of championship belt,
the eagle belt. I mean, there's so many pictures.
The gold belt. Yeah,
of Inoki holding that belt, that specific belt.
And also, like second reign of Bruno Sammartino to Bob Backlund to a lot of champions in America had a very similar design belt at the time.
Yeah, that's right. It did look similar. The eagle was a big trend. It was the motif.
Yeah, so it's like that's the world title, right? And the fact, now that we're all grown up, that the Inoki had purchased rights for NWF title, and Johnny Powers, as the owner of NWF, basically sold the rights to New Japan and Inoki and left the country. And NWF never promoted another show in America. Although he did come back as a NWF North American heavyweight champion with different belt. Yeah, but never was NWF champion again. And it was really like, wow, that can happen. The Japanese, superstar would beat American champion in Japan, and title would stay in Japan and become Japanese title basically. And it was really exciting because same time period, Giant Baba had PWF belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pacific Wrestling Federation heavyweight title, and didn't even have the world in it. That initially it was PWF world title, but just as soon as he joined as a member of NWA, that he took the world out of there, because the only world title is your NWA World Heavyweight title, and the Pacific Wrestling Federation title just became Pacific Wrestling PWF title. And so just kind of, even as a 7th grade kid, you have to scratch your head. It's like, so NWA world title is bigger and above PWF, is that it? And so Inoki's idea was to have his world title on his TV. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the words they used, the vocabulary they used, it was world, international.
Yeah, we talked about it. It was Ricky Dawson's title, and and WWE title was the Fire, and those are very important in Japanese wrestling. Yeah.
Over in the States, I think you would just sort of accept whatever they're. That's not the main issue. I think because especially as national television brought wrestling national, we got to see different kinds of takes on it. I
think Japanese fan and Japanese TV station and Japanese sports media always compared wrestling with professional boxing when they only had WBC and WBA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No IBF or WBO or anything like that. That always the WBC and WBA. Those are the only two recognized world title or something like that. Only organization, foundation, federation, stuff like that. And before. Actually, there's a little bit more detail to this Johnny Powers thing. That summer of 1973, before NWF title match, there was a NWA this time, NWA North American Tag Team title in Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium. The champion was NWA North American Tag Team champion Johnny Powers and Pat Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi traveled to LA, challenged its tag team title. We all believed it's NWA North American Tag Team title. Was there such title? It's okay. This is wrestling. But even Inoki, 1973 and 1974, 2 years in a row, he wanted to join NWA as a membership, and went to NWA annual convention conference and applied for membership in NWA. But there's a group of American promoters that recognize Inoki to voted for Inoki to be member of NWA. There's another group, friends with Giant Baba and Dory Funk, that let's not let Inoki into this group and all this. And Inoki was denied the NWA membership 2 years in a row, 73 and 74. Interesting, huh? As big as Inoki was, there was a couple of years that he wanted to be NWA member so he could have all kinds of NWA superstars in his television. Are you following me on that?
Yeah, and I think, what do you think? Was there a kind of kinship between Johnny Powers and Antonio Inoki as far as that goes? They were both sort of on the outside.
So they went ahead and created NWA North American Tag Team Champion title, and the champion was Johnny Powers and Pat Patterson, two American stars that helped Inoki early on in New Japan Pro Wrestling. See, Carl Gotch was like a booking agent for international talent for New Japan, but as good a coach and the the whole Karagach God of Wrestling thing was good, but he wasn't necessarily like a promoter type. He couldn't book famous American superstars to New Japan ring. And Johnny Powers and Pat Patterson were close friends with Inoki, and those two helped early on in New Japan. And Johnny Powers, Pat Patterson, well, they weren't even working together because Johnny Powers from East Coast, Buffalo, right? And Pat Patterson at the time, San Francisco champion, like a U.S. champion. Anyhow, those two, Inoki's two friends, they got together, they became New Japan Creation, of course, but they went ahead and recognized NWA, North American Tag Team Championship. And those two were original champions, Johnny Powers and Pat Patterson. And Inoki and Sakaguchi flew to Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium, had a title match. Smart thing was, though, Inoki and Sakaguchi did not win the title from them. Not winning makes this title more prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
How so? How did it make it more prestigious if they lost?
Yeah, because Inoki and Sakaguchi couldn't beat him.
Mm-hmm.
That the champion is strong, and it's hard to get that North American Tag Team title.
And this was before Inoki won the title.
Right.
Okay,
summer of 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny Powers and Pat Patterson together, they came to New Japan December of 1973 and had a title defense. Inoki and Sakaguchi couldn't beat him this time. But on the same tour, Inoki did win the single title, NWF title, from Johnny Powers at the end of the year, 73. One title. But later on, probably they had a phantom title switch that the NWA North American Tag Team Champion was two German, not German American, of course, but the Karl von Schatz and Kurt von Hess. They came to Japan as NWA North American Tag Team Champion and dropped the tag team belt to Inoki and Sakaguchi the following year. Karl von Schatz and Kurt von Hess. Yeah. So German gimmick wrestler was still there. Nazi gimmick wrestler was still around in the 70s. Yeah. Anyhow, so Johnny Powers was NWA North American Tag Team Champions, and also NWF World Heavyweight Champion. So New Japan and Antonio Inoki used Johnny Powers as like a top name. Yeah. And just about every year from that point on, Johnny Powers comes back to Japan and challenges Inoki for NWF title as a former champion. Until like 74, 75, 76, until like 79. And final tour he had was inaugural Madison Square Garden Tag Team Tournament. Then at the time you already had Andre the Giant, the Stan Hansen, all these superstars. So the Johnny Powers was like a slowly fading, from the top spot. He later interviewed that Johnny Powers was claiming that he had about 30, 40 tours with Japan, right? I counted. It was like 13 tours.
So
it's okay.
A little bit of embellishment, but he'd been around a couple times.
It's okay. Remember Dick Murdoch episode?
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's been to Japan a couple hundred times, right?
Sure.
He must have felt like a couple hundred times. But when we counted, he was like 55 tours. But that's a lot. Yeah.
It still is a lot. That's true.
Yeah. So 13 tours altogether. And 1980, Madison Square Garden Series. That's like a forerunner of today's IWGP or the G1 Climax Spring Tournament kind of thing. That what was interesting was that this Madison Square Garden Tournament 1980, you already had Bob Backlund in there, Andre the Giant in there, Dusty Rhodes in there, very first tour of young Hulk Hogan in there. You had Stan Hansen in there, people like Chavo Guerrero and Tito Santana, all these WWF associates. But Inoki still brought Johnny Powers into this package. After after Inoki signed a partnership with Vince McMahon Sr. Isn't that interesting?
So Johnny Powers was really a big part of that pre-era New Japan.
The Vince McMahon Sr. partnership, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also NWF, it was important for Inoki to have existing American World Heavyweight title instead of creating it in Japan.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a natural or organic rivalry, as I think they were going for, and I think that their paths were adjacent and they suited each other at the time, and I think it worked out. I can't say much more than that because Johnny Powers left the business sort of a couple of years after all this.
After that, right.
Yeah, not long
and
after.
The last tour he had was 1980, and he came back 10 years later, just once. That was September 30th, 1990. Antonio Inoki's 30 years in business at the big, real big ceremony at the Yokohama Arena with people. They created a little league called Greatest 18 Club. They created the championship belt too. Greatest 18 Club, including Luthes, the Andre, the Stan Hansen, the Bockwinkel, the Billy Robinson, and Johnny Valentine was, brought in, and Johnny Powers was in it, and the judo, King William Ruska, and all these people were gathered in Hiro Matsuda. They all gathered, Bockwinkel, of course, gathered in the ring and took the big picture together, like a Greatest 18 Club. And Johnny Powers was in it. And for American, audience, I've been often asked, because they recognize the photos, Andre in there, Stan Hansen in there, that the Bockwinkel, the Hiro Matsuda in there, that the Johnny Valentine in there. Who's that person? Who's that person? A lot of American fans did not recognize Johnny Powers in that same photo. Yeah, because not in the establishment, huh?
It's funny how things turn out. I think Johnny Powers ended up being quite a big star in Japan and bigger than he was
in the stateside.
Yeah, by stateside fans.
Yeah, but he was NWF champion.
He was, but that's regional. I think that's regional.
Yeah, it's a regional.
And I think
also, yeah.
I don't think somebody down in Atlanta would care at all
not that.
about somebody like that.
But early 70s, like a wrestling review magazine.
He got coverage.
Yeah, not just that, but there's a ranking. Remember,
sure,
NWA ranking top 10, AWA ranking top 10, and WWF top 10 ranking. And right next to it, they always had for a while though, but they had NWF top 10 ranking in there too. So for some people, or a certain period of time, like a 5-year period, that they treated NWF as almost equal, like a different league. And what was interesting was that before NWF, he was a promoter for not just promoter, but he was like a TV producer for syndicated TV programming called Championship Wrestling. We have to explain this syndicated TV program to today's audience, huh?
I mean, it did develop over the years, but when we're talking in the 80s, that when cable was part of the equation, the syndicated television packages were a big part of the landscape, and pro wrestling was connected to it too, because so many different areas were offering different products that they could syndicate.
And also, you never know what part of the country or the part of the world, for that matter, that syndicated TV program pops up.
Right, not necessarily. You'd see a lot of random pieces of content from certain areas of the States broadcast in another area that doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just maybe part of whatever the package was.
Middle of the night. Yeah.
Trying to, I don't know how to explain syndication package deals in the 80s in just one sentence.
So he was producing the TV, the program as a package, and was selling to all over the country and all over the world, for that matter. And it was interesting that he, touched all these kind of what was new at the time. Syndication TV, that the UHF channel. Probably today's audience don't know that. And then cable, and then there was the closed circuit shows before pay-per-view, and it's decades before your streaming, on the internet. And wrestling always evolved with this media technology, and early on Johnny Powers had his hands on those things. A lot like Inoki, is so similar. Is what I'm saying. And so he was,
correct me if I'm wrong, he even trained some wrestlers as well, isn't that right?
I believe so. With in the Toronto area with Sweet Daddy Siki, and later on that became part of Ron Hutchison's wrestling school, right? Yeah, but he wasn't all interested in training people. I don't think he was more on promoting and producing side of it. That later on he did the rock concert and other stuff, and he even promoted later on MMA show in Ontario area. And but he really was not in public eyes after he retired from wrestling, and he retired altogether in 1982. So it's been 40 years. So he just pretty much wasn't found, this past 40 years. Yeah. And it's interesting that Inoki passed, October 1st of this, 2022, and 2 months later he's gone. Yeah. I'm not saying interesting, but like,
no, it's a, why would that happen? It's a coincidence. These two, and they were born around the same time, and they passed around the same time.
Only one month apart. Yeah.
It's funny. I didn't know until he told me tonight that that he promoted MMA a little bit.
Yeah.
That was the same as Inoki in the late 90s as well. Of course, on a
I guess
scale.
late 90s to 2000, new millennium.
They had some kind of symbiotic relationship. I don't know what exactly it was. I don't think it was a strong or maybe even
they
conscious
had the
relationship.
same kind of antenna or something.
Something like that. There's some kind of magnetic or kinship or connection between these two. Something strong, unspoken, but clearly past that. If they're not adjacent, they're definitely crossing.
Yeah, and then also think about it. He was running NWF in Cleveland, Ohio at the time, and Inoki offered to buy this NWF title to keep in Japan. Then he basically, all right, he sold it. And in the old-fashioned, 70s promoter, probably went back to, States and still had the NWF title, right? And but he kept the promise that he never promoted NWF World Title again. And following year, there was, if you remember, Eddie Ihorn's IWA, the short-lived but the national syndicated new group with Mil Mascaras as a champion. Johnny Power was a part of that group too. Was always like a fighting against this establishment. IWA, International Wrestling Association, and having Mil Mascaras as their world champion, they tried to run like North Carolina, like NWA Crockett land, and they lost the war, but always went up against the establishment. Very similar to Antonio Inoki's IWGP idea later on. See, IWGP in 1980, in 3 years in making, was that he was going to create undisputed, the biggest, the top of the mountain world championship. well, later on became IWGP title, but the idea of IWGP was to make all the existing championship belt vacant, then create only one title. Yeah. Oh, then it became another title, but it's been 40 years. But the idea of IWGP was such. That was Antonio Inoki's idea. Then really gave up NWF title too. Yeah. And that created Hulk Hogan as, first inaugural champion, the tournament winner. You would think Inoki will beat Hulk Hogan to become the inaugural winner of the IWGP tournament 1983. Instead, Inoki lost, and that made IWGP even bigger. Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
I mean, losing bigger or something. But the NWF title was the New Japan's it was the biggest thing, my childhood thing, because Inoki did not defend NWF title every month or anything like that. He only, had the title match 4 or 5 times a year, much like your boxing world champion.
Right.
Yeah, and that's he doesn't defend his world title that easy. It has to be worthy opponent and all super, big event kind of thing. And the first title defense was against Japanese then star Strong Kobayashi. Then Inoki against Strong Kobayashi was such a big deal, and it made NWF world title. It's really like a world title in Japan.
Yeah, it seemed to turn into something a lot bigger than it initially was.
Yeah, I think so. And something All Japan Giant Baba didn't do was that Inoki's title, NWF title defense, they always brought the orchestra or the live band or the big symphonies, always played national anthem before the title match. This is wrestling, but they always played American national anthem and Japanese national anthem. They had a whole ceremony, and people like Korogachi and Luthes come in as a witness, and the title, Inoki's title, NWF world title match looked like world title match. Yeah. And, like Inoki against Billy Robinson. Yeah, only happened once, but they played both national anthem, and again Korogachi and Luthes as a witness at the ringside. It was the whole setup was it looks like very important world heavyweight title match.
Yeah, it was almost like the opening to a tennis tournament,
like a World Cup something.
Yeah, World Cup, or it felt like a sports special, like if you remember back in the early-ish days.
The announcer, TV Asahi's sportscaster announcer, not the wrestling people, but they had this network sportscaster announcer calling play-by-play Inoki's matches. Yeah, so he made it look like you're watching something really important. Really, it did.
Really enhanced the reality or importance of
reality of it. Yeah, in hindsight, it was another wrestling title match, but those, sort of window dressing in a way was very important at the time. And wrestling was on network television, 8 o'clock prime time, and sometimes that Inoki's title defense goes so long that they have to cut the TV program. It's like, we have to go. I'll show you next week. It's like, wow. It's like, see, the little argument for wrestling haters at school or your neighborhood or your uncle or relatives that the wrestling always finish before the TV time is over. That's why it's so fixed, right? No, Inoki's title match goes overtime sometime, make it more real. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because live TV, it just didn't fit in time frame that the match went, longer or something. And a lot of different things to make it look so real. Yeah, that's 70s like wrestling effort, isn't it?
Yeah.
But now that it's been a big news that pretty big news that today's fans, probably the name Johnny Ace doesn't mean all that much, but for
Johnny Powers?
I'm sorry, Johnny Powers. I'm sorry.
Johnny Ace means something different.
Yeah, well, when you say Johnny, I just I automatically said that he's a friend of mine. Yeah, name Johnny Powers. Really like a just refresh childhood memory or something. That wow, he used to come over here every year and as a former world champion and challenged Inoki, and Inoki successfully defended his title again. And but the former champion respected. And he always had the signature 70s curly hair.
Yeah, the afro. He had
the
70s.
Yeah, I was looking like a Brady Bunch hairdo.
Yes. Like Greg Brady.
Yeah. And what was interesting that the TV announcer at the time, because of Dick Baya Destroyer and the Jack Briscoe's finishing move, figure 4 leg lock is a big thing, right? But they were calling Johnny Powers the same move, figure 8 leg lock or Powers lock. So it's like it's the same basic same maneuver, but it's like more devastating or something.
It was always along the lines of like that, the power lock or figure 8. NWF versus NWA. It always kind of felt like it was trying to sound somewhat similar to what the other
establishment
were offering, but they weren't a part of it, so they had their own version. And
But the TV, it's just general TV audience is not wrestling magazine reading oriented wrestling fans.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
It wasn't as big of a deal. It's not like it is
because
today.
I learned something when I was like 7th grade, 8th grade. The one January tour, Giant Baba's All Japan had Jack Briscoe and Hardy Race and Dory Funk together on same tour. Every night's NWA title match, right? I mean, that's like really big deal for reading-oriented wrestling fans. At the same time, January, I believe 74 and 75 then, that New Japan had Maguire brothers. Maguire twins, like a 600, 700 pound, obese twin brothers, Maguire brothers. Kids at school talked about Maguire brothers, and nobody... Yeah, because it's something they watched on TV last night. Did you see Maguire brothers? Oh, they are so big, right? And nobody talked about Hardy Race and Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. at school. That's how strong TV was. Yeah, because of course I was reading wrestling magazine, back to back to every page of it. So for me, having Jack Briscoe, Hardy Race, and Dory Funk Jr. on the same tour, and basically having NWA title match night after night was such a big deal. But people watching network TV Friday night 8 o'clock Inoki's show, they were watching Maguire Brothers, and they talked about it. That's the difference between TV audience and loyal wrestling fans. And general TV audience is bigger, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So same effect that I believe that the general TV audience watching Friday night 8 o'clock Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling program, World Pro Wrestling, they felt NWF and Johnny Powers was a legitimate world champion. And treated him like that too. And he didn't have, regular tours. Whenever Johnny Powers came back, it was something special, and the former champion challenging Inoki again, kind of thing. And just, I guess, depends on how you produce your TV show. I learned something as a kid. It's like, right, what everybody watches on TV and how serious wrestling fan watching the show. It's like we're watching two different things.
Right.
Yeah. But the Johnny Powers brought back lots of memory, and you have to be over at least 50 to know Johnny Powers and how big of a star he was in Japan.
But he was, and he still seems to have that, resonance with a certain generation of fans.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was a champion, NWF world champion, and he was the one who dropped the title. Inoki beat to become his first world championship, and yeah, it was 1973. Everybody was a kid. Yeah, it was like that.
But it was part of Inoki's mythos.
A big, legacy. Yes, it was very much first world title. For Inoki.
And it's grade 18. The grade 18 is a big part of Inoki's. What's the word I guess I'm looking for? Mystique or aura?
Yeah, pretty much.
A big part of it. So.
Yeah, and then in the 30-year anniversary show, he brought back all the former rivals under the giant Lou Thesz, the Billy Robinson, the Tiger Jeet Singh, the Johnny Valentine, and Johnny Powers was in it. Yeah. He wasn't even active or he was even associated with wrestling people at the time. It was 1990. And that was the last tour. Already, 33 years ago. Oh, my gosh, Yeah. But, yes.
But, yeah, I think that wraps it up. And it was just a couple days ago that he passed.
It was December 30th. December 30th.
I think the news just came out.
Right, just came out. Right,
yeah, he did pass.
Because wrestling people didn't really catch up on that. Somebody found one of those obituary website thing that the funeral home put out that this is where you send flowers to his family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was like a website thing for this funeral service, and somebody found it because his real name is Dennis Arnold Walter or something, And not too many people didn't think it was Johnny Powers, the wrestler.
Right, he seemed to stay away from the business, for quite a while, so.
Yeah, and he didn't have that curly, Afro-looking 70s hairdo anymore. Right.
Yeah, not many people do these days.
Oh, no, not, completely just, unrecognizable.
Katsuhiko Nakajima, maybe, that's it. Close enough.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
so. Kidding.
Oh, today's curly hair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
But
Johnny Powers was interesting character, interesting kind of different kind of superstar in Japan.
Yeah, and if you really want to learn more about Inoki, you have to study the Johnny Powers period.
Yeah, he was an important person in Antonio Inoki's career. Yes.
And what that belt, the NWF belt.
Oh, that
Eagle
belt. Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Oh, that's a signature championship belt. Yeah. It's totally Inoki's belt, more so than the IWGP belt.
Yeah, it's the belt that I envision when I imagine the picture of Inoki with
Inoki. Yeah, and also he was in his 30s, and obviously Inoki's peak years.
Right, he was just turning into a megastar. He was a star, but he's turning into the Inoki we know.
Antonio Inoki, right?
That's right.
And same year they passed. Really, signals. Yeah, but end of an era.
End of an era for sure.
Yeah. Very good.
All right. So if people have questions or they want to reach out to you and ask you questions.
And also that some historical figure or the historical events or particular wrestlers that they want us to go over on this, podcast, we'd like to, take questions. Yeah. And send me questions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
if you want to find me at Twitter at Fumihikodayo, Fumihikodayo, Fumihikodayo on Twitter, or just Fumisaito on Facebook.
And on Twitter, I'm at Justin M. Nipper, Knipper. That's it for this week. Until next week, Fumi, take it away.
So long from Tokyo.
Write that down. Write that. Write that. Write that. Write that. Write that down. Write that. Write that down. Write that down. Write that down.